My daughter called me, broke into a $3,000 microphone I paid for. The room laughed the way a match laughs when it meets gasoline, quick sparks, then silence that burned hotter than the joke itself. The band froze mid-vamp. A waiter's silver dome tilted, steam curling into the chandelier light. I stood at the back of Ochre Point Hall, Newport, Rhode Island, tasting copper. That microphone and E6 headset in champagne finish was stamped on the venue invoice I'd wired 4 weeks earlier, $178,420, marked paid in red. Paige didn't know that. She didn't have to. She was my kid. She was supposed to see me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from, because I was listening from the shadows of my own daughter's wedding. Paige squinted past the spotlight, searching for faces instead of mine. My dad, she said, with a smile that didn't quite fit. He's always had big dreams. But when it came to paying for this, well, let's just say, thank God Evan was there to pick up the slack. She gave a nervous little laugh, like she knew it landed sharp, then turned to her new husband. Evan did the shrug I'd seen rehearsed in mirrors, half humble, half victorious. His mother, Vivian, dabbed her eyes with a cloth napkin, holding it a beat too long so everyone could catch the gesture. I pressed my thumb against the folded program in my pocket. Inside, I'd scrawled 4 numbers in pen, each underlined so hard they dented the page. $178,420 venue, 0814, $64,800 florals, 0828, $22,500 band, 0901, $12,400 photography, 0903, proof I could feel under my thumb, proof that didn't laugh back. Earlier that day, Evan's groomsmen clinked craft beers on the seawall, calling themselves providers. One of them muttered the word legacy before lowering his voice to liquidity. Paige laughed with them, her shoulders curling into their story. That's when I saw it. The way she bent herself to fit a narrative she didn't write. It wasn't that's the first time. At the rehearsal dinner, under a sign that read "This rehearsal may be recorded for quality," I heard Vivian say it out loud. He has to look like a guest, not a wallet. Her voice carried, caught clean on the mic check. I hadn't planned to use it. Not then. Not ever. The truth is, I planned on silence. I planned on clapping for their vows, raising a glass, and cutting into overpriced cake. I planned to let Evan's family paint me as a dreamer with empty pockets, because I told myself it didn't matter. The numbers lived where they needed to in my bank's wire history, in stamped receipts, in a trust binder tucked inside a Providence safe deposit box. I told myself that my late wife, who whispered before she died, protect her future, wouldn't mind if I swallowed one insult for peace. But peace doesn't live in lies. Peace lives in boundaries. Paige was 19 when I expanded Hayes Freight's second warehouse on the Providence riverfront. She wrote a college paper calling logistics the bloodstream of a city. I still have that title page, coffee-stained and folded. 4 years later, when I sold Hayes Freight in June 2023, she asked if that meant life was handled. I said yes. After taxes and the Rhode Island Foundation gift, $33,004,912, sat across trusts our lawyer, Nora, built with steel ribs, spendthrift clauses, independent trustee, no in-law access. I never told Paige the number, not because I didn't trust her, but because I did. I wanted her to have space to be young before money changed her reflection. My plan was clear after the honeymoon, September 29th, coffee with Nora, an introduction to her counselor, and a quiet reveal. That was the calendar reminder in my phone. But now I stood in a hall that smelled of lilies and shoe leather, watching my only child mock me as broke in front of 200 guests. Evan's hand curled tight at her waist. The photographer's flash bloomed and died like lightning. I thought of the florist's first estimate, $42,000, and the invoice a month later for $64,800. Same flowers, more adjectives. I paid it anyway, underlined both numbers, stacked them in a folder. Love is paying first and building the case later. Good thing we had Evan, Paige said, writing the line again. She looked toward me now, her eyes narrowing against the light. Because Dad, she dragged the word, letting the audience wait. He's still chasing dreams. Nervous laughter scattered like coins dropped on tile. Then she softened. But we love him anyway. That line, we love him anyway, cut deeper than the joke. I've used it myself. It's the kind of phrase you throw like a lifeline, but it lands like a stone. It means love in spite of. Never love because. My hand brushed the leather folio in my jacket. Inside, the paid invoices, the florist's estimate, the band contract signed in my handwriting, the photography receipt. And one more thing. A June 2023 bank slip with that staggering number, $33,004,912. I didn't carry it for pride. I carried it because grief makes people forget promises, and mine was clear: protect her. The applause lapped and receded. The MC whispered to the band, the drummer easing into an old standard. Guests kissed Paige's cheek, perfume and congratulations sticking to her gown. For a split second she caught my eyes, and in that second I crossed the bridge between letting it go and drawing the line. Not yet, not until the story finished telling on itself. Dinner plates landed. Silver cutlery chimed. I looked at the projection screen, mine. Booked September 1st for a slideshow that never existed. I imagined it lit with receipts, wires, and one sentence spoken in Vivian's voice. He has to look like a guest, not a wallet. I touched the ring on the chain around my neck, my wife's ring, and felt the ridges warm from my skin. If they wanted broke, they would get boundary. And when the lie finished hardening, I'd put my truth where their laughter had been. I slipped out to the balcony and let the Atlantic wind slap me like a witness who couldn't stay quiet anymore. Below, the lawn glowed under string lights, tables dressed in linen that smelled faintly of starch and salt air. Inside, 200 guests clinked glasses and laughed at a version of me that didn't exist. I pressed both palms against the railing until the iron left grooves in my skin. The word broke kept repeating in my head, but not in Paige's voice, in my wife's. The last time she held my hand in that hospital bed, she whispered, "Protect her future." She didn't say protect her feelings or protect her pride. She said future. I thought about the embossed card still folded in my pocket, the one from the rehearsal dinner the night before. Evan had raised his glass, winked, and said, "Maybe your dad can just write IOUs for the bar tab." The laughter then had been softer, less sure, but I'd felt the same sting. I slipped that card into my jacket pocket and underlined the date, September 12th, 2025, like a man circling a wound. The truth was on my phone. The bank app showed the wires, crisp black numbers lined up like soldiers, $178,420 to Ochre Point Hall on August 14th, $64,800 to Florals by Design on August 28th, $22,500 to Atlantic Jazz Collective on September 1st, $12,400 to Evermore Photography on September 3rd. A row of facts no joke could erase, but staring at those numbers in the dark didn't make me feel powerful. It made me feel invisible. I pressed play on a recording I wasn't supposed to have. The rehearsal, the audio crackled, and then Vivian's voice rang out. "He has to look like a guest, not a wallet." My breath caught. The sign at the hall, "This rehearsal may be recorded for quality," was my cover. I hadn't planned to use it, but now it pressed into my ear like a nail. I shut my eyes, gripping the phone like it could steady me. For 19 years, Paige had let me braid her hair on Sunday mornings when her mother was too tired. For 19 years, I'd kept every report card, every sticky note doodle. I had a shoebox labeled Paige Childhood tucked into the same safe deposit box that held the trust binder. And now here I was, being rebranded in front of her new family as a man who couldn't pay his way through a wedding. The hurt wasn't about money. It never was. It was about watching the only person left from my family let strangers write my role for me. My chest tightened until I had to sit on the balcony's iron chair. I ran my fingers over the chain under my shirt. The ring on it, my wife's, bit cold against my thumb. I remembered her last coherent day in May 2023. Sunlight through hospital blinds. Her voice cracking as she said, "Don't let anyone take advantage of her kindness." I promised I wouldn't. And then I sold Hayes Freight 1 month later for $33,004,912. That slip of paper still sits in my folio, The wire transfer confirmation from Bank of Providence, dated June 16th, 2023, $33,004,912. Proof that I was not broke. Proof that her legacy didn't die with her. But tonight, proof wasn't enough. Tonight, I had to choose between silence and survival. Through the glass doors behind me, I heard the band ease into a Frank Sinatra standard, the kind that makes people sway and smile like they're in black and white film. I watched Paige lean against Evan as guests toasted them again, oblivious to the storm just outside. I thought about Nora Patel, my estate attorney, who had spent an entire July afternoon explaining spendthrift clauses to me as if I were a stubborn student. Michael, you cannot protect her feelings. You can only protect her assets, she'd said, pointing to the clause that barred in-laws from ever accessing trust funds. I nodded then, but now her words tasted different. Maybe tonight wasn't about feelings. Maybe it was about boundaries disguised as numbers. I pulled the folio from my jacket and opened it under the yellow balcony light. Receipts slid under my fingers. Venue, florals, band, photography. Each one a truth dressed in ink. Each one saying, "You are not broke, you are not invisible." I stared at the florist's two invoices, July's estimate of $42,000 and August's final bill of $64,800. $22,000 gone with the stroke of a pen. Late season imports, the planner had said. But Tom Reeves, my private investigator, told me a different story. 2 weeks earlier, Tom called from a payphone near Wickenden Street, his voice low. "I traced a shell called Anchor Celebrate LLC," he said. "Your son-in-law Sep's cousin registered it. Vendors are funneling kickbacks there. Every overage you paid, Michael, they shaved a slice off." I wrote it down on a napkin, circled it, folded it into the folio. I hadn't told Paige. I couldn't, not yet, not without a plan. Now, on the balcony, with the word broke still ringing in my ears, I realized something. Their lie wasn't careless. It was rehearsed, practiced. A script delivered with timing. Just like at the rehearsal when they workshopped the punchline. And Paige had signed on to it whether she understood or not. My phone buzzed. A text from Tom. "Got more on Evan Sip's cousin. Call me tomorrow." I didn't reply. Not yet. I leaned back in the iron chair, staring at the Atlantic's black water. I could hear the faint rise of voices inside, laughter rolling again like nothing had cracked. But something had. I wasn't angry anymore. I was hollow, and hollow men either collapse or build walls. I stood, slid the folio back into my jacket, and pressed my hands flat on the railing one more time. The grooves were deeper now. My chest still hurt, but it hurt steady. I whispered into the wind, "I sep not broke. I sep boundary." Then I turned back toward the hall, toward the people still laughing at my expense, and I felt the first outline of a plan. When the laughter finally died down inside the hall, I already knew what I had to do. Silence had been my plan. Boundaries became my new one. The shift started months earlier, back in May 2025, inside a glass-walled conference room overlooking the Providence River. Nora Patel, my estate attorney, sat across from me with her usual neat stack of binders. She wore a navy suit, and the kind of patience you only learn from years of explaining law to stubborn clients. "Michael," she said, tapping a section with her pen, "this spendthrift clause means exactly what you asked for. No spouse, no in-law, no seed provider SIFT can ever touch Paige Sip's funds. It sips airtight." I'd nodded back then, sipping bitter coffee. At the time, I thought it was a precaution. By August, I realized it was a lifeline. Because that was when the florist's invoice jumped from $42,000 to $64,800, with no added roses, no new peonies, just a line labeled late season imports. I'd paid it on August 28th anyway, but I emailed myself a screenshot of the July estimate and tucked it into a folder labeled floral variants. It wasn't paranoia, it was a breadcrumb. Then Tom Reeves called. Tom wasn't just a PI. He used to be an auditor for a freight company until corporate politics pushed him out. That made him perfect for me. Someone who knew how money bled through small cuts. "I traced something odd," he told me on August 30th. His voice was grainy through the prepaid phone he preferred. There's an LLC called Anchor Celebrate, registered this spring by a Clark cousin. The vendors you're paying, they're sending rebates there. Evan's fingerprints are all over it. Sending rebates there. Evan's fingerprints are all over it. I wrote the name down in block letters, circled it 3 times. Anchor Celebrate LLC. I didn't confront Paige. Not yet. She was in love, blinded by the pageantry, the dress fittings, the promise of a future with Evan. I wasn't going to torch her world with a match I couldn't prove, not without something undeniable. So I shifted gears. On September 1st, I walked into Ochre Point Hall under the guise of confirming seating charts. In truth, I signed a separate rental contract for the projector system, billed in my name. The planner asked if I'd be running a slideshow of childhood photos. I smiled, nodded, said yes, but I uploaded nothing. The account stayed empty, waiting for whatever I decided to show. That night, I pulled out the trust binder at home. Section 7.3. Distributions may be paused if the beneficiary or spouse engages in coercion or fraud. The ink smelled like Nora's office. I could still hear her voice. It's not a punishment, Michael. It's a guardrail. On September 10th, I signed a notarized addendum to my will. The language was blunt. If coercion arises, all distributions pause pending counseling. I slid the stamped document into my folio alongside the florist invoices. The notary, a man with half-moon glasses, looked at me oddly as I folded it away. Big family changes, he asked. Just making sure the future stays protected, I answered. By then, Tom had more proof. He emailed me 3 vendor statements. Each showed small but telling wires to Anchor Celebrate LLC, $12,000 on August 16th, $1,200 on September 2nd, $2,250 on September 3rd. Each transfer came within 48 hours of my payments. It was like clockwork. A skim so careful they must have thought no one would notice. I printed the statements, stapled them behind the florist invoices, and wrote in the margin pattern, not accident. The plan crystallized. Let their narrative play out. Let them joke. Let them paint me as broke. Then, when the lie had hardened in public, I would show receipts in public too. Not anger, not insults, just truth projected in light. I booked an appointment with Nora for September 11th. We met at 10 a.m. in her office, sunlight bouncing off the river. "You're sure you want to go through with this?" she asked. I nodded. If they defame me at that wedding, I have the right to defend myself with documents, not words. She folded her hands. Then speak facts. No emotion, offer Paige a way forward, and lock the doors behind the rest. I left her office carrying a leather folio heavier than it looked. Inside, trust clauses, invoices, PI memos. Outside, a calm face. Friday night, September 12th, the rehearsal dinner. Evan joked again about me writing IOUs. Vivian polished the punchline. I said nothing, but I felt the audio recorder in the corner humming. I confirmed with the tech staff that the projector was ready for my slideshow. I knew then the weapon wasn't fury. It was patience. Back in my hotel room, I opened the folio one more time. Wires, invoices, contracts, addendum, PI statements. I stacked them like dominoes waiting to fall. Then I slid in one last page, a wire transfer confirmation dated September 11th, moving $500,000 into a charitable remainder trust in Paige's name. Literacy programs in Providence would benefit first. She'd see that later. It was my wife's voice in my ear. Don't just protect her, teach her. The plan was clear now, proof in hand, projector booked, legal guardrails signed, and one daughter about to learn the difference between love and leverage. I zipped the folio, slid it under the hotel bed, and lay awake staring at the ceiling. The wedding was hours away. So was the line I was about to draw. The Monday before the wedding, September 8th, 2025, I drove to Providence with the folio strapped in the passenger seat like a co-pilot. The air smelled of early fall, damp leaves, diesel from the port, the faint sweetness of apples stacked in roadside bins. I parked across from Cafe Nuevo, the river glittering under late morning sun. Nora was already there, a navy binder open, her reading glasses sliding low. She didn't waste words. "Michael," she said, "if you set determined to reveal this, keep it clean. Documents only. No speeches that can be twisted later." I slid the florist invoices across the table. July's $42,000 estimate and August's $64,800 bill. Behind them, Tom's vendor statements. Anchor Celebrate LLC, rebates like clockwork. Nora read them in silence, tapping her pen against the margin. "This is fraud," she said softly. "Small but fraud." She looked at me. "If you show these publicly, you'll embarrass Evan and Vivian, but you'll protect Paige." "That's the only reason I'm here," I told her. She closed the binder. "Then speak like a witness, not a father. Calm, factual." Tuesday, September 9th, I called the trustee. We spoke for 20 minutes. Every clause of the trust read back to me. "No third party may request distributions," he confirmed. "No in-law, no spouse. Independent oversight only." I hung up with relief sharp enough to sting. Wednesday, September 10th, I drove back to Ochre Point Hall. The clerk behind the counter was young, barely older than Paige. I asked for hard copies of the venue invoices. He returned with 3 pages, each stamped in red. "Paid, August 14th, 2025. I folded them into the folio like ammunition. That night, Tom emailed me a timeline. I printed it, spread it on my hotel desk, and traced the pattern with my finger. August 14th, $178,420 wired to Ochre Point Hall. August 16th, $12,000 referral fee to Anchor Celebrate LLC. August 28th, $64,800 wired to Florals by Design. September 2nd, $1,200 loyalty bonus to Anchor Celebrate. September 3rd, $22,500 wired to Atlantic Jazz Collective. September 3rd, $2,250 partnership share to Anchor Celebrate. Every wire was a vein, and every rebate was a needle. Thursday, September 11th, I sat at my dining table at home, a lamp burning low. I stacked the receipts, contracts, and PI memo in order, like dominoes waiting for a finger. Then I opened my laptop and moved $500,000 from a liquid account into Paige's charitable trust. A literacy program in Providence would see the first checks before Christmas. The confirmation email dinged into my inbox at 11:07 p.m. I printed it and slipped it into the folio. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It was faith. Faith that when the dust settled, Paige would see that love builds as much as it protects. Friday morning, I called Nora. "The projector is ready," I told her. "Michael," she said, her voice even, "when you stand in that room, don't call names. Show numbers. Let their own words convict them." I nodded into the silence. Numbers, not names. All week I'd carried the folio everywhere, into cafes, into meetings, even into the shower where steam curled around it from the counter. It wasn't paranoia. It was insurance. Every document inside was a line I'd drawn, and if they crossed it again, the whole room would see it. Friday evening, I checked into the Newport Hotel, 2 blocks from the hall. I set the folio on the desk, opened it one more time, and ran my fingers over the invoices. Each number glared back like a warning light. $178,420, $64,800, $22,500, $12,400. Proof that I was not broke. Proof that I had been paying for love that turned into leverage. I thought about the irony. For years, Hayes Freight had thrived because I could track every shipment, every container, every bolt of fabric moving through my warehouses. Now, my daughter's wedding had become a freight schedule of its own: payments, kickbacks, lies, and finally, truth. As I zipped the folio shut, I whispered to myself the same phrase I whispered on the balcony days earlier. I am not broke, I am boundary. And for the first time all week, I felt steady. Friday, September 12th, 2025. The rehearsal day. The last quiet stretch before the storm. At 3:15 p.m., I walked into Ochre Point Hall under chandeliers still half-dimmed from setup. Rows of gold-backed chairs faced the aisle, each one stiff as an accusation. The MC called for a sound check. I slipped into the back row, the folio balanced on my lap, though no one noticed. "Let's us run the toasts," the MC said. Evan cleared his throat, tapped the mic, and smiled at the empty room. "You know Paige's dad, he's a dreamer. We all love him for it, but, well, good thing I was around to cover the gaps." He chuckled at his own delivery. From the side, Vivian interjected, "No, no, say it tighter, make it funny. Try, say tay," he promised. "But promises don't set pay for weddings." The planner laughed too loud. "That's good," she said, scribbling something in her notes. I sat there, fists locked around the folio, listening to them rehearse my humiliation like it was a Broadway script. I didn't speak. I didn't flinch. Because on the wall behind them, right above the MC's head, hung the little white sign I'd been counting on. This rehearsal may be recorded for quality. Every word was being captured. Lawfully. Permanently. At 5:40 p.m., I left the hall and walked 2 blocks to the rehearsal dinner venue, a smaller ballroom dressed in autumn garlands. I signed the bill, $50,000 deposit held weeks earlier, now finalized at $38,250. The receipt slid across the counter. I folded it neatly and tucked it into my jacket, another piece of proof, another stone for the wall I was building. During dinner, I watched Paige laugh with her bridesmaids, oblivious. She wore a pale blue dress, hair pinned up with little pearl clips. For a moment, she looked 19 again. The same girl who wrote essays about logistics being the bloodstream of a city. My throat tightened. I wanted to pull her aside, tell her everything, warn her. But then Evan raised a glass and winked at me across the table. That wink told me all I needed to know. He thought the stage was his. At 10:05 p.m., as I walked back to my hotel, my phone buzzed. A message from Tom Reeves, my PI. A photo snapped from across the street. Vivian, standing outside Coastal Union Bank, speaking to a loan officer under the glow of a street lamp. Tom's caption read, "Clark Trust Lien filed July 2025. She's under pressure." Pressure explained everything. The kickbacks, the obsession with appearances, the need to paint me as weak while propping Evan up as savior. They weren't just greedy. They were drowning, and they were using Paige's wedding as their raft. Back in my room, I spread the receipts across the desk like a general laying out maps. Venue, florals, band, photography, dinner, each with dates, amounts, red PA'd stamps. Then Tom's timeline of Anchor Celebrate transfers, $12,000, $1,200, $2,250. I stacked them, clipped them, slid them back into the folio. At 11:30 p.m., I called Nora. "They sept doubling down," I told her. "They rehearsed the broke line tonight. It's sept scripted." Her voice came calm through the line. "Michael, remember, speak facts, offer Paige a path forward. Then lock the doors behind the rest." "Say it again," I asked. "Numbers, not names. Facts, not anger." I repeated the words until they felt like scripture. Sleep never came. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Vivian's voice. "He has to look like a guest, not a wallet," and Evan's smug delivery. Good thing I was around to cover the gaps. But then I'd touch the chain around my neck, feel the ridged edge of my wife's wedding ring, and remember her last words, "Protect her future." So I let the anger cool into something sharper, something that could cut clean when the time came. When dawn finally broke over Newport, I sat at the desk with a cup of bitter hotel coffee and whispered into the steam. They wrote their script. Tonight I show mine. Saturday, September 13th, 2025. The day everything tilted. I woke to the sound of gulls outside my Newport hotel window and the faint clatter of carts from the kitchen downstairs. My suit hung pressed and waiting, dark navy with a silver tie, my wife once said, made me look too serious for a birthday. Today serious was all I had left. By noon, I stood at St. Mary's Chapel watching my daughter walk down the aisle. The stained glass windows painted her dress in patches of color, blue, red, gold. Evan smiled like a politician, steady, rehearsed. Paige beamed, and for a heartbeat, I let myself believe this could still be her story, not theirs. The vows were clean, unremarkable. No jabs, no hidden edges. Just two people promising forever. But as the afternoon turned to evening, the reception at Ochre Point Hall pulled me back to reality. Chandeliers lit the room in warm gold. The band tuned up near the stage, waiting for their signal. Guests drifted in with chatter that smelled of champagne and oysters. My folio sat under my chair, a quiet animal waiting to be unleashed. Around 6:30 p.m., Evan's groomsmen toasted each other again, as providers. I heard the word the same way I'd heard it on the seawall days earlier, capital P like a title they thought they'd earned. Vivian sat front and center, angled perfectly for the photographer, her pearl necklace catching every flash. The bandleader approached me quietly. "Would you like to speak before dinner, Mr. Hayes?" I shook my head. After. Because I knew what was coming. At 7:10 p.m., the first course was cleared. Glasses refilled. The MC tapped the mic, calling for the bride. Paige stood. The same smile plastered on, a champagne flute in her hand. I watched her knuckles tighten around the stem. She began, sweetly enough, thanking friends, bridesmaids, family. Then she turned, eyes glinting under the light. And of course my dad, my dreamer, always chasing big ideas. We love him for it. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Then, with a grin rehearsed just the night before, "But dreams don't pay for weddings, do they?" Laughter rippled. A few guests glanced my way, unsure. Evan leaned in, adding, "Good thing we had a provider around." More laughter. Louder this time. Vivian dabbed her eyes again. The napkin more theater than cloth. My chest felt like a vice. I touched the chain under my shirt, the ring warm against my skin. My wife's voice echoed, "Protect her future." I looked down at the program folded in my hand. Inside, the four numbers were still there, underlined hard enough to break the paper: $178,420, $64,800, $22,500, $12,400. My proof, my truth. The MC motioned to the band for the cake-cutting cue. I raised a finger. Wait. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Nora. I typed back one word. Ready. The planner glanced at me nervously. She knew I'd booked the projector weeks ago for a slideshow that never came. "Do you want it set up?" she whispered. "Yes," I said. "Dim the lights when I signal." The servers hovered with silver domes, frozen like statues. Guests shifted in their chairs, wine glasses half raised. The air grew tight, like the moment before a freight train whistle splits the night. I stood, smoothing my jacket, and stepped toward the stage. Paige caught my eye. Relief flickered there for a second. She thought I was going to play along, to laugh at myself, to be the dreamer dad her new family painted me as. Instead, I tapped the mic. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate my daughter. She is my pride, my heart, my reason for everything Sef ever built." I let the room breathe, but there Sefad's been confusion. Whispers stirred. Evan shifted uncomfortably. "Tonight, Yusef heard stories about who paid for what. I don't intend to argue." I looked toward the planner. I'll let the receipts speak." I gave the signal. The lights dimmed. The projector flickered to life. The first slide filled the wall. The venue wire, $178,420, dated August 14th. Stamped paid. Gasps, murmurs. The second slide, the florist's invoice, $64,800, with the earlier $42,000 estimate beside it. The third, the band contract, $22,500, my signature in dark ink. Each slide bled into the next, slow, undeniable. Then came Tom's timeline, crisp arrows connecting my wires to Anchor Celebrate LLC's rebates, $12,000, $1,200, $2,250. Each amount tied to a date, each one landing in a shell company's lap days after my payments. The room went silent. You could hear the bandleader's breath, sharp through his nose. Finally, the audio, Vivian's voice, projected through the same speakers she'd rehearsed in. He has to look like a guest, not a wallet. A collective intake of air. Vivian's face drained pale under the chandelier. I paused, then spoke into the silence. I am not broke. I am boundary. I paid every invoice, every bill, not because I had to, but because I love my daughter. But love does not finance contempt. The words landed heavy. Paige's face crumpled, eyes darting between me and Evan. I turned toward her gently. Paige, I love you more than anything. But if the people around you teach you that disrespect is acceptable, then my silence would make me complicit. The projector dimmed. The lights rose. Servers shifted awkwardly, then began placing plates again, though no one touched their food. The bandleader looked at me for direction. I nodded once. Music swelled softer this time, as if trying to stitch the air back together. The reveal was done. The line was drawn. And as I stepped down from the stage, folio still in my hand, I felt it for the first time all week. Steady, calm, unshakable. Tomorrow would bring fallout. Tonight, the truth was enough. The lights dimmed, and for a breathless second, Ochre Point Hall felt less like a wedding reception and more like a courtroom. The chandeliers glowed faint above us, the walls shimmering with the hum of the projector I had booked under the guise of a slideshow. The first slide hit. Payment confirmation. Ochre Point Hall, $178,420 wired August 14th. Stamped paid in red. The room rippled with murmurs. One man leaned closer to his wife and whispered, "That sips the venue." The second slide rolled in. Florals by design. Invoice dated August 28th, $64,800. Next to it, the earlier July estimate for $42,000. Guests gasped. Even those who didn't know flowers understood the $22,800 difference, staring back at them. Then the band's contract appeared. $22,500. My signature clear at the bottom. The sax player shifted in his chair, suddenly avoiding the audience's eyes. Slide after slide. Proof after proof. Receipts they couldn't laugh away. The fourth slide landed hardest. A timeline drawn in Tom's careful hand. Arrows connecting my payments to Anchor Celebrate LLC. $12,000 on August 16th. $1,200 on September 2nd. $2,250 on September 3rd. Each arrow tied back to an overage, each landing in a shell company no guest had ever heard of, but one Evan knew too well. The room went quiet, save for the soft hum of the projector, and then the audio. Vivian Septz's voice filled the hall. He has to look like a guest, not a wallet. It echoed through the same speakers that had carried Paige's toast minutes earlier. The silence that followed was heavier than any laughter that had preceded it. I stepped forward, microphone in hand. I am not broke, I said evenly. I am boundary, and every receipt you just seen is the truth. Evan shifted in his chair, his jaw tight. Vivian's hand froze mid-dab against her cheek, the napkin hanging limp. Paige stood frozen, eyes wide, her lips parted but no words coming. I paid for this wedding. I continued, voice steady, every bill, every contract. Not because I had to, but because I love my daughter. But love, I paused, letting the words weigh on the air, does not finance contempt. Gasps rolled through the hall. A few claps started in the back, tentative, nervous, but real. I turned to Paige, softening my voice. Paige, I love you more than anything in this world. But when the people around you rehearse lines to humiliate me, when they pocket kickbacks from money meant to celebrate you, silence is not an option. Love doesn't mean letting people mock me. It means protecting you even when it hurts. Evan shot up, grabbing for the mic. This is outrageous, he snapped. These are private documents. This is slander. I pulled the mic away calmly. No, Evan, this is evidence. Every number on those slides came from receipts and bank statements with my name on them. If you like to challenge it, I will be happy to meet you in court, where truth isn't optional. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Vivian opened her mouth to protest, but her voice cracked. Michael, This isn't Sep the place. This is exactly the place I cut in. You chose this room to stage your little script. You rehearsed it last night under a sign that warned you, this rehearsal may be recorded, and recorded it was. The audio played again. Her line crystal clear, he has to look like a guest, not a wallet. Gasps. Again. This time sharper. Vivian Sep's pearls trembled against her chest. I turned back to the crowd. I won't set argue. I won't set insult. I Detzel simply show you what I tet've already done. With a nod, the final slide appeared. Charitable Remainder Trust. Hayes Family Literacy Fund. $500,000. Wired September 11th, 2025. Beneficiary, Paige Hayes. The room stirred again, murmurs turning into scattered applause. This, I said, is where the money goes when it isn't set, stolen, or mocked. It goes to Paige. It goes to children in Providence, who need books in their hands, tutors in their schools. Love builds. Love doesn't set skim. The applause grew stronger. Not thunderous, not unanimous, but strong enough to pierce the silence. Evan Sep's face flushed crimson. He reached for Paige Sep's arm. Come on. We set her leaving. But Paige didn't move. She was staring at the screen, at her name on the charitable trust slide, at the date September 11, before tonight, before any of this broke open. Her voice cracked when she finally whispered, Dad, you did this. I met her eyes. I did this for you, for your mother, for the promise I made the day she died, that no one would take advantage of you, not even the man you married. Tears welled in her eyes. She looked at Evan, then back at me, and her hand slipped out of his grip. The band leader glanced at me. I nodded. The music swelled softly, filling the cracks left by silence. I closed the folio, tucked it under my arm, and stepped down from the stage. Guests whispered, their words half apology, half shock. A few patted my shoulder as I passed. Others avoided my eyes. That was fine. At my table, the servers finally lowered the silver domes, steam curling into the air. Dinner resumed, not normal, not easy, but steadier than before. The planner approached, pale as paper. Mr. Hayes, I didn't know about the kickbacks. I looked at her evenly. Then Yusuf learned something tonight. Don Det set, let them use you again. She nodded, almost grateful for the scolding. I sat back in my chair, my daughter still staring at me across the room, Evan fuming at her side, Vivian crumbling under the weight of her own words. The reveal was over. The line was drawn. And for the first time that night, I felt the weight in my chest ease. The rest would come tomorrow, fallout, explanations, anger. But tonight, under the chandeliers of Ochre Point Hall, I had reclaimed my voice. Sunday morning, September 14th. The lobby coffee tasted like cardboard in relief. I stood by the hotel window, watching gulls knife the gray sky over Newport Harbor, when Evan materialized in the glass behind me like a bad reflection. We need clarity, he said, without a hello. His tie was loose, his jaw set to break. About Paige Sep's access. I kept my hands in my pockets, so he couldn't see them steady. All questions go through counsel, I said, and handed him Nora Sip's card. Office hours start tomorrow. He blinked at the card, then at me. You humiliated my family, he hissed. No, I said. Your family wrote the joke. I projected the receipts. He took a half step closer. You think you can hide money behind paperwork? Trusts, I said. With an independent trustee. If you want to learn the word thets, spend thrift. Sets, Monday sets, a great day. He flinched at that pride bruised, not conscience, and stormed toward the revolving door. The bellman watched him leave with the expression of a man who'd seen subtler storms. By noon, I was back in my room, the folio open on the desk. I photographed every page I'd shown the night before, the venue wire, the florist's estimate and invoice, the band contract, the photography receipt, Tom's timeline with the anchor celebrate arrows, then slid each original back into plastic sleeves. If last night was exposure, today would be preservation. At 1:10 p.m., I emailed Tom, proceed with consumer complaint on vendor kickbacks. Include timeline plus attachments. CC Nora. His reply came 3 minutes later. On it. Filing draft by end of day. The rest of Sunday moved like freight through a yard. Slow, noisy, nothing graceful about it. Texts thudded in. From the planner at 3:22 p.m. I'm horrified. I didn't know about the rebates. I've initiated a $7,500 fee reduction on my end. I'm sorry. From the band leader, 4:16 p.m. I didn't understand that partnership share line. Returning $2,250 to your card today. We play music, we don't skim. From an unknown number at 6:05 p.m. that turned out to be a Florals by Design junior manager, we are conducting an internal review. Please accept a $3,200 courtesy refund pending audit, courtesy. The word sat crooked in my mouth, but money flowing backward is still money flowing right. Around dinner, I walked the harbor and let the wind sandpaper the edge off my anger. I kept hearing my wife's voice, protect her future. And for the first time since the reveal, the instruction felt less like a summons and more like a compass. Protection doesn't always look like shelter. Sometimes it looks like sunlight. Monday, September 15th, 9:02 a.m. I dialed Nora from the car before pulling onto Memorial Boulevard. He confronted me in the lobby, I said. He wants say clarity set on fit and sake excess. Nora exhaled through her nose. Let's sips make it crystal. A SEP sending letters to the vendors, preservation of records, no alteration, no deletion. To the planner, acknowledgement of fee reduction. To Anchor, celebrate, hold all communications. And to Evan, all contact through counsel only. By 10:30 a.m., my inbox began to fill with read receipts. At noon, Tom forwarded a draft complaint addressed to the state's Consumer Protection Unit, clean, factual dates and amounts like fence posts in a straight line. I read it twice and added one note. Attach the this rehearsal may be recorded photo. He wrote back, already in Appendix A. At 1:40 p.m., my phone lit with a Providence number I didn't recognize. Mr. Hayes, this is Dana from Coastal Union Bank. I'm contacting you on behalf of a mutual acquaintance, Miss Clark, Vivian's banker. Her voice was professionally warm, the kind that can move alone along with a smile. I can discuss Miss Clark Sips matters, I said. If this is about Saturday night, please direct any comments to my attorney. There's been a misunderstanding, she soothed. If we could just sit together. No, I said. We don't set fixed rebates over lunch. Silence held for a beat. Understood, she said, tone turning metallic. We shall be in touch with counsel. By late afternoon, things began to move in the other direction. The band's refund landed at 3:07 p.m. A florist credit appeared at 3:52 p.m. The planner's $7,500 fee reduction posted to my card at 4:11 p.m. with a trembling email that used the word unaware 3 times. None of it felt like victory. It felt like a leaking ship finally finding the valve. I drove back to Providence at dusk, headlights ribboning against the highway. Home, I carried the folio upstairs like a sleeping child. I set it on the dining table and made a pot of coffee. I didn't need the habit of paperwork nights. I slid the receipts into chronological order for the 100th time. I labeled a new tab, refunds, and tucked the day's credits behind it, $2,250 band, $3,200 florals, plus an unexpected $10,000 overage correction from the venue's Deckers subcontractor that hit my account just after 5:30 p. $15,450 in total. Moving back by Tuesday evening would not change a life, but it would restore a boundary. Money returning is not just arithmetic. It's an apology in a language some people only speak when cornered. At 7:18 p.m., I typed an email to Paige with no attachments and more courage than I felt. Breakfast Wednesday, Café Nuovo at 8, no speeches, just us. I'll bring the trust binder and a counselor's card. We can talk about boundaries and next steps. I stared at the cursor, blinking at the end of the word us like a heartbeat. I didn't hit send. Not yet. I waited. At 11:42 p.m., my phone lit up on the nightstand. Why did you embarrass me? Paige wrote. The words were bare without punctuation, like she'd emptied them out fast before courage ran. I typed, erased, typed again. Finally, I showed numbers because their words were rewriting you. Breakfast Wednesday. If you want answers, I said'll bring every receipt and the counselor Sep's card. I love you. Dad. The read receipt popped up. For a minute, nothing. Then, okay. I lay back, eyes stinging, the ceiling fan carving the room into slow pieces. In the dark, I could feel the folio on the table downstairs like a tide. Proof has weight, but tonight the weight felt purposeful, like ballast instead of burden. Tuesday, September 16th, the machine kept humming. Ton texted a photo of the complaints stamped intake, filed. The planner emailed a formal apology letter accepting responsibility for insufficient vendor diligence. The venue manager called to say the decor subcontractor had misinterpreted a clause and was issuing a $10,000 correction already posted the night before. I printed each admission and filed them under refunds and vendor correspondence, the tabs fattening into something that felt like order. Around lunch, I walked to the river and watched a barge slide under the bridge, low in the water, even and inevitable. Freight moves because it's balanced. Families are freight too. The trick is keeping the weight where it belongs. That night, I put the trust binder on the dining table beside two mugs. I laid Nora's business card on top, and next to it, a single sheet with the words I'd started saying to the wind and now needed to say to my daughter, I am not broke, I am boundary. The storm had passed. The cleanup had begun. Tomorrow we would see if anything we built could still stand. Wednesday, September 17th, 2025. Café Nuovo smelled of espresso and burnt sugar when Paige walked in at 8:03 a.m. Her hair was pulled into a plain knot, her makeup lighter than usual. She looked younger, almost like the girl who once sat at this same riverfront cafe writing essays about freight routes. But her eyes were swollen, ringed in red. She slid into the chair across from me, arms folded tight. I didn't hear it that way, she said, before the waiter could even set down water. I nodded and pulled my phone from my jacket. With a few taps, the rehearsal audio filled the quiet cafe. Vivian's voice. He has to look like a guest, not a wallet. Clear as glass. Evan's practiced laugh layered on top. The planner chuckling too loud. Then Paige's own voice, softer but still there, rehearsing her toast with a nervous laugh. Her shoulders slumped. I didn't think anyone would take it seriously, she whispered. Paige, I said gently, sliding the trust binder onto the table. They weren't set joking, they were setting a stage. And you were on it with them. I opened the binder to the spendthrift clause, the ink sharp underlined by Nora Sepp's steady hand. This protects you, independent trustee. No spouse or in-law access. Distributions only for health, education, maintenance, and support. Not a cent can be siphoned by Evan or his family. She traced the line with her finger, her lips pressed tight. I slid another page forward. The charitable remainder trust confirmation from September 11th, $500,000. Her name on it. This was before the wedding, I said. Not punishment, not reaction, a gift. For literacy programs in Providence. For you to see that love builds, even when people around you skim. Her eyes filled. She covered her mouth, whispering, Mom would have loved that. She asked me to protect your future, I reminded her. That's all I tried to do. At 11:45 a.m., Evan stormed into the cafe, tie askew, face red. He didn't even sit down. Show me the portfolio, he demanded, voice loud enough for heads to turn. I closed the binder calmly. No. You think you can hide behind lawyers? You embarrassed me in front of my own family. His fists balled at his sides. You are a coward. Paige flinched at the word. I stayed steady. A coward hides. I showed every number in front of 200 witnesses. That's the opposite of cowardice. He pointed at Paige. You don't see it? He's manipulating you. He's trying to keep control. I met her eyes. I firm, protecting you. There's a difference, and the law knows it. By noon, Evan stormed out, leaving the door swinging wide. Paige sat frozen for a long moment, then whispered, I don't know what to believe anymore. I slid a card across the table. Dr. Martin Ellis, financial counselor, Believe what Seps documented, I said. Believe what Seps stamped and signed. The rest, you work through with someone neutral. That's Seps why this exists. She picked up the card, stared at it like it was heavier than it looked. Friday, September 19th. The cracks widened. Paige forwarded me an email thread at 2:07 p.m. Evan and Vivian. Pressing the planner, fix the invoices. Adjust the numbers. We need it clean. The planner's reply was clipped, terrified. I can't alter paid invoices. The father has copies. Please stop asking. I read it twice, my stomach sinking and settling at once. They weren't just greedy, they were desperate. At 3:15 p.m., Nora fired off a formal demand for preservation letter to every vendor, retain all invoices, emails, and records. No alterations, no deletions. Within the hour, the bandleader privately messaged me, "We've returned the $2,250 partnership share. I'm sorry. I won't be part of this anymore." By evening, Evan's tone shifted from bluster to threat. A text lit my phone. Defamation has consequences. My lawyer will be in touch. I typed a simple reply. Defamation requires lies. Here's your transcript of the speech you gave. Here are the receipts I displayed. Facts aren't defamation. They're defense. He didn't respond. Saturday morning, I found a note slid under my hotel door, unsigned but unmistakable. We can fix this quietly. Just stop pushing. I didn't pick it up. I took a photo, time-stamped it, slid it into the folio, another piece of proof for the ledger. By Saturday evening, the venue refunded $10,000 in decor overages. Florals refunded $3,200. The planner's $7,500 reduction posted. One by one, the numbers came back. Small currents reversing a tide. $15,450 in total. Not life-changing, but symbolic. Every dollar a confession. Justice doesn't always look like handcuffs. Sometimes it looks like money flowing back where it belongs. Sometimes it looks like a planner's shaky apology letter. Sometimes it looks like your daughter forwarding you evidence that the people who claim to love her were trying to falsify invoices behind her back. Friday night, Paige texted me again. Just 3 words, I need space. I typed back. Take all the space you need. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors you can walk through when you're ready. She didn't set reply. But I knew she set read it. Late September, Providence. The city smelled of wood smoke and lemons as I walked into St. Teresa's on a Tuesday afternoon. The same pew I'd chosen at my wife's funeral was still polished smooth by time and knees. Sunlight cut through the tall windows, slicing gold across the floor. I sat with my hands folded, the chain around my neck heavy with her ring. The folio was at home, zipped and filed in order. Every receipt, every refund, every preservation letter tabbed and labeled. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the need to touch it. It had done its job. Proof wasn't just paper anymore. Proof had become peace. I closed my eyes and let the quiet hold me. Justice isn't always a gavel. Sometimes it's a silence that doesn't sting. When I walked back along the river that evening, the sky blushed pink and gray. I thought about freight schedules again. Weights distributed evenly across a line so nothing tips. That was the rule that kept Hayes Freight alive, the same rule that kept me steady through grief and betrayal. Families are freight too. If you put too much weight on one side, mockery, greed, secrets, the car tilts and the whole train derails. Balance is everything. At home, I placed the trust binder back in the safe. On my nightstand, I left a single page pulled from it. I am not broke, I am boundary. I wanted those words to be the last thing I saw before sleep, and the first thing I saw at dawn. The phone buzzed that night. A photo from Paige. She sat at a wooden desk, a counselor's card in her hand. The caption read, "One step." I stared at it for a long time, tears stinging. Not a resolution, not a repair, but a beginning. I typed back, "I'm proud of you." No hearts, no flourishes. Just words steady enough to hold their own weight. The world hadn't become perfect. Evan was still out there, bruised pride and fading threats. Vivian still had a lien hanging over her like a storm cloud, but those weren't my battles anymore. My battle had been fought and won in the only place that mattered, protecting my daughter's future, even when she couldn't see the danger herself. As I set the phone down, I whispered to the empty room, "You didn't lose me, you gave me away." And tonight, I walked myself back. Sleep came easier than it had in months. October settled into Rhode Island with sharp mornings and the smell of damp leaves. Life didn't snap back to normal, it shifted into something quieter, more deliberate. On October 3rd, Tom called. The AGSIP's consumer unit opened an inquiry into Anchor Celebrate LLC, he said. Voice calm as ever. Nothing splashy, just letters to vendors. They sell want statements, contracts, rebate logs. I pictured Evan's cousin, the one who registered that shell company, receiving a letter stamped with the state seal. Paper has a way of stripping swagger from a man. Vendors started bending before the ink even dried. The planner sent an email stamped "You are gent" at the top, promising full cooperation. Florals by Design updated their contracts, new clauses barring undisclosed rebates. The band leader filed a sworn note disclaiming all partnership shares going forward. Even the venue issued a memo. All vendor relationships will be reviewed for transparency. It was cleanup disguised as contrition, but cleanup all the same. Vivian's mask slipped next. Word reached me through Tom. She'd sold a lakeside property in Vermont to cover her trust lien. No announcement, no gala invitations, just a quiet listing and a sale that undercut the Clark name she wore like perfume. I clipped the article from the Real Estate Digest and slid it into the folio under a tab I labeled Consequences. Paige moved out of Evan's condo by mid-month. She didn't announce it, didn't ask me for help. Just texted a photo of 2 cardboard boxes stacked by a sublet door, a thrifted lamp glowing in the corner. Starting over, she wrote. I sat at the dining table staring at that photo for a long time. Relief doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives in the shape of a lamp from Goodwill and the courage to leave. We set a calendar reminder together, reviewed distributions with the trustee in 6 months, contingent on steady counseling sessions. No shortcuts, no sudden windfalls, just boundaries held in place until they became habit. In quiet moments, I found myself writing letters I never sent to my wife, to my younger self, to the daughter I hoped would someday understand. One night I wrote, "Justice is not thunder. It is steady rain that washes what doesn't belong." By Halloween, pumpkins lined the porches in Providence, children paraded in costumes along Benefit Street. I walked the neighborhood with a cup of coffee, listening to the echoes of laughter, the simple kind that doesn't rehearse its lines. The weight in my chest felt lighter. No courts, no headlines, no shouting matches, just invoices returned, rebates exposed, and a daughter taking her first steps back toward herself. I mailed a thank you card to the band leader. Thank you for returning what wasn't yours. Play something beautiful for someone who needs it. Inside, I tucked a check for double the amount he'd refunded, marked donation to your music school fund. Not all debts are numbers. Some are gestures. The Clark name would limp through its galas and dinner parties. Evan would spin his story to anyone who'd listen, but none of that mattered. My ledger was clean. My promise to my wife was intact. My daughter was moving, slowly but surely, toward her own balance. Justice had come. Quiet. Lawful. Inevitable. November's wind cut colder than October's, the kind that makes the harbor smell of iron and salt. I came home one evening to find a thick envelope wedged in my mail slot, heavy cardstock, embossed lettering. Clark Foundation Autumn Gala. Theme, Integrity. I laughed out loud, standing in my foyer with my coat still on. Integrity, from the family who rehearsed my humiliation like a punchline, who funneled kickbacks through shell companies, who tried to rewrite invoices with the ink still drying. I set the envelope on my desk, studied the gilt edges, then fed it through my shredder. The blades chewed it down to ribbons, the word integrity vanishing into a plastic bin like so much confetti. Some invitations aren't worth keeping. That weekend, I walked into the Providence Literacy Center, the one where the $500,000 trust had already started its work. A volunteer named Rosa showed me a small classroom where kids hunched over whiteboards, tracing shaky letters. Their voices echoed, soft, stumbling but proud. One boy looked up at me, his eyes wide, and said, "I spelled my name." It hit me harder than any refund ever could. Money returned is justice, but money transformed is legacy. That night, Paige arrived. Not with Evan, not with Vivian, alone. She wore a thrifted jacket too big at the shoulders, hair a little messy from the wind. She looked tired, but real in a way I hadn't seen in months. She stood beside me in that classroom doorway, watching the children trace letters. For a long time, she didn't set to speak. Then, quietly, she whispered, "I said I'm sorry." I turned to her, the weight of the ring around my neck, pressing warm against my chest. "You don't owe me sorry," I said. "You owe yourself space to heal." Her eyes filled, and for the first time since the wedding, she let me hug her without resistance. The hug wasn't perfect. It was fragile, tentative, but it was real. We walked outside together, the night air smelling of wood smoke and harbor water. Across the street, a jazz band practiced in a second-floor studio. Their notes bled through the windows, offbeat, human, imperfect, the kind of music you can't fake. Paige slipped her hand into mine. "I don't know what comes next," she said. "You don't too," I told her. "Boundaries will carry you until you sipple ready to carry yourself." We stood under the November sky, quiet but steady. The Clark family could keep their galas. They could raise glasses under chandeliers and toast to integrity they didn't understand. I didn't need their stage. My justice had already been written on invoices, in refunds, in the small hand of a child learning to spell his name. As we walked to the car, I thought of the line that had carried me through it all. "You didn't lose me. You gave me away." And tonight, I walked myself back.